Welcome, everybody. We are back as we kick off the start of season 7 of the In the Paint show with a very special episode 191, highlighting the 2024-2025 preseason FAB 50 rankings. I am your host, Chelsea Hopkins. I'm back with my guys, Ronnie Flores and Ani Umana. How are you guys doing today?
Great. I'm doing great. I know Ani is too. Dodgers about to win the World Series. It looks like it's been a long fall for both of us. Ani doesn't like the Dodgers, but we've been studying the teams. We've been gearing up for this. It's kind of like our 7th high school season. We're talking about teams on this pod in various forms. So I'm excited. I know Ani is. I hope you are too, Chelsea. We're going to get into it.
You already know I'm excited. I get to see y'all too again. We here. Obviously, it's the FAB 50 show. And, man, there's a lot to cover, but I'm excited just to get back with the gang, and we here.
Yeah, guys, I missed you. I definitely missed you. I'm happy to be here. This episode, we're going to break down the best high school teams across the country. I'm excited because, obviously, the landscape of basketball is ever-changing. I don't know so much about this year, but the theme last year, we had very dominant team in Mount Verde Academy, and I don't really know what to expect. So for the next hour and a half, we are going to discuss the best teams. I'm going to have you guys both on the hot seat. You're going to let me know who's the best in the country, and we're just going to go down the list from there. But speaking of theme, we talked about the dominance of Mount Verde in the past. I think this year is a little bit more unpredictable. I mean, kind of up in the air. The talent is spread across the country. Players are transferring. The landscape is just different. So I want to get your guys' take on that before we start jumping into things. Ronnie, what do you think?
Yeah, you're right. I think last year we had Mount Verde number 1. I don't think that was a huge surprise to a lot of people. And they ran the table. That doesn't always happen. They've been number 1 before. And for this year, I think as we look at the college landscape, and we look at and now trickling down to the high school landscape, Ani, it's like you have to reload and rebuild every year. We're almost to that level. Now, as we look at the teams, we're going to look at them. There will be some teams with like 4 returning starters, 10 lettermen, and those teams are teams to watch. But the high-level teams, for the most part, seem to be reloading every year.
Yeah, no, they do. I think it's, Chelsea made the point about guys transferring. I think the first part of recruiting is retaining. And so some of the schools that don't have a traditional that aren't like the Mount Verdes or Sunrise or Link or Wasatch, it's key for them to return their core guys, and then also add to those core pieces. But like you said, Ronnie, when it comes down to like majority of really those NIBC teams, it's going to be just they can reload every year. It could be a whole new 10, a whole new 8. You can bring 2 back. So, the roster is going to look completely different at those levels. But I think at like a Columbus, who know we're going to talk about some this year, like they retain their the core guys. Like those high schools got to retain their core guys.
No doubt.
Yeah, and speaking of the landscape, I know last year before we kicked off our show, we talked about the rule change that was going to be implemented, how they were going to go. The one-on-one being eliminated, no double bonus with fouls reset after each quarter. How do you guys, I know you guys weren't a super fan of those rules, but how do you think they played out this past season? How do you think it's going to work out this upcoming season?
I'll take it, Ani. Some of the games I was with Ani, it'd be like, we're watching a game, 6-point lead. I'm just screaming, game over. The game's over. Unless you really blow it, the game's over. You know what I mean? Because the teams are good. Again, we're going to high-level events, and I see a team, and I'm thinking, man, imagine if that was a 1-1, how much pressure would be on him. You see the kid? I even saw a kid ask the ref, and the ref goes, gives him the sign, and he looks at him, he's like, 2? Knock down the first one, knock down the second one. It just changes the game, but from what I gather, and Ani could speak on it too, like that wasn't it. The teams adjusted maybe a little faster than I thought. The game flow might have been a little better in the second and fourth quarters. They adjusted pretty fast, and I think the talent wins out, Chelsea. I think the teams with the better talent went out, and then the teams with the better coaching that can do that. And like I said, you didn't see big time comebacks down 11 with 3 minutes to go, down 9 with 2.5 minutes to go. Those games were over. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I did feel like the games went a little bit longer, especially if they were calling it tight. Like if it was, they call usually if it was a half and it's like shoot, 1-on-1 at 7, 2 at 10, you looked at it in a way of, okay, even if I fouled 5 times that quarter, we still got the plays are still going. When you foul like 3 times in a quarter, you're almost like, okay, you got to be careful. Then when it gets to that 5th foul, it seems like then another foul. The teams are shooting a lot of free throws in the first quarter. But I think what's beneficial is when you get to the second and fourth quarters, like Ronnie talked about, where okay, it's in the fourth, it's a clean slate. Now they're playing, and usually the fouls don't get called as much in that fourth quarter because they're letting the players really dictate the game. So I saw like a mix of both sides of it. Like with the really high level games, I thought they let them play it out more, and it was just a smooth transition. You go to like the local DFW game or even at Houston, it's a foul fest, right? So it'll be like 40 fouls called and the game's taking forever today. So it just depended on the quality of the referee and the quality of the game.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay, I can see that. Before we get into the rankings, let's talk a little bit about the history of the rankings, Ani, or Ronnie, before I'll give this question to you. Dive into that a little bit, and then let's talk about the greatest teams in the Fab 50.
Yeah, well, the history of it now. This is the 25th year in this format with 50 teams and some regional rankings. I can't believe it's been 25 years. 99-2000 season. The rankings actually started 13 years before that, 87, 88. I just did a tweet post with Miami Senior was the first preseason number 1 team. Shaky Rodriguez, the late Shaky Rodriguez, that team was taken over by Frank Martin, who went on obviously to South Carolina, and they had great talent. I just can't believe it's been that long. And just back then, it was obviously USA Today had their rankings out, and they were very popular. And then the national prep poll started then, and we had regional rankings, and people liked it. They got picked up by the Associated Press, and they were distributed, and ESPN used them in their Scholastic Sports America show. So it got great publicity because people always refer to that as the ESPN rankings. Oh, we were number 1 by ESPN, even though we were in USA Today. Those were actually the national prep poll. Like, and former NBA players will talk about their team like, yeah, we were number 1 by ESPN. Oh, we were number 1 by USA Today. So it's been a great run. This I got to give a shout out to Doug Huff and Mark Tennis, who helped me a lot with this over the years. And 25 years in this format, it's a lot of work. But I think, as Ani likes to talk about, that the teams 25 through 50, you get more traditional teams in there. You get teams that are very happy to be ranked, and it's kind of almost like a bubble of the top 25, and you get more traditional teams, especially now with the landscape the way it is, as you talked about on the top of the show, it's changed so much. So, these teams are high level. And I think, Ani, one of the things is, like, if you talk to high school coaches at that level who are coaching top 10, 15 teams, they're coaching like college programs. They have to reload every year, just like college. They have to make sure, like Ani says, retainment. For some of them, NIL comes into play, and that's the level we're at. The highest levels are run like a college team.
I like that. Chime in, Ani. Do you have anything?
I didn't know it was 25 years, man. Congrats, Ron. That's big time work. This is fun. Like, I think this is maybe year 3 of just kind of doing the show. I've always followed it since I was a kid, since I was young. So, man, but like I'm always excited like to see the teams from the bottom half. I've told Ronnie this, like 30 through 50, and which ones kind of really emerge and become like a top 20, top 15, maybe a top 10 team. And I'm looking at it this year. I think we have some guys that are like that. And even you look at some guys that are ranked high, some teams that are ranked high, you're like, okay, like their schedule's kind of rough in the beginning. Do they have enough depth? So it's always fun just to see how the rankings kind of pan out. I always like to see the bottom half like 30 through 50 and just see like which ones really just climb up and, or the ones that just entered and they have a lot of buzz and they're finally in the top 50 if they can actually like stay in that. So that's why I've always been interested just to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm a lot newer to this space than you guys are. Been around a while, especially Ronnie with all the work that he's done. But I would have to say that 2023-2024 Mount Verde team last year with Cooper Flagg, Robert Wright, Derek Queen was one of the best teams I have been able or had the pleasure of watching. I'm really curious to get your thoughts on where they fare of some of the greatest teams of all time. Like, I understand that, you know, their careers are just getting started. I guess we won't really know until 20 years from now. But I think that group has a chance. I mean, they had 5 McDonald's All-Americans. No, wait. Hold on, Ani. Can I make
I'm just nodding I'm just shaking my head, but you can continue.
They had 5 McDonald's All-Americans. Obviously, they went undefeated and they ran the table. They were just pretty much a step above of any other opponent that they faced. And granted, like I said, you guys know the history a lot better than I do. But I'm just really curious to see where you guys think they fare against some of the greatest teams of all time.
I think there's tiers to it. I would say they may be a second tier team. I think that 2020 Montverde team, obviously, like that, they would be, to me, they were the best team I've ever seen. We talk about Kay Cunningham, Ryan Nembhard, Derek Whitehead, Deron Sharp. I mean, Scotty Barnes was on that team. Like,
don't forget Scotty Barnes.
it was just loaded. I think there's like 6 pros on there. Like, how many of them are actually like rotational guys? I think I named about 3 of them.
Yeah, don't forget our guy Moses Moody. He's making a movie.
Yeah, Moses Moody too. Like, who got a payday too. So I mean, you talk about a loaded group. To me, that team came in and played Duncanville. I will always remember this at Thanksgiving Hoop Fest. And Duncanville was the best team we had in the state. And they beat the shit out of them. And I was like, yo, this team is unstoppable. like they were the best team I've seen. That 2016 Chino Hill squad with the Ball brothers, and then big fella that's in Atlanta, Onyeka Kongwu. Like, that was the funnest team I've ever seen. Like, that was the funnest team. They arguably are the best team. Maybe the best team of all time. But I think when you look at these 4 squads, obviously Ronnie could probably talk better about the Dunbar team. I think, is that with Lil Muggsy Bogues? He was on that team.
Okay. Reggie Williams and those guys. Again, the Boys of Baltimore 30 for 30 is great. Watch that if you get a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I knew. I remember watching that doc. And the 93 Oak Hill team, I know you probably have more familiarity with that. But when we look at Chino Hills and Montverde, I don't think this past Montverde team really competes with those 2 teams. So yeah, I think they're a tier 2. I think they're a level below this group. If you and you know, I'm not too knowledgeable like the real history, like all those teams. I mean, if someone told me they were tier 3 and they named off 5 different teams,
you wouldn't know. Yeah.
And that's just a good point, Ani, because that's a disclaimer. Those 4 teams that you see on our graphic, fans and listeners, 83 Dunbar, 93 Oak Hill, 16 Chino Hills, and 20 Montverde. It's the teams people talk about. Those are not necessarily the 1 through 3, 4, but like historically, Dunbar is, people knew they were preseason number 1. Oak Hill was preseason number 1, and the only team that wasn't, like you said, caught the country and world by storm was Chino Hills, and they came close. If you look at that margin of victory, it's really nice, but look at the other team's margin of victories. It's
right.
38. You know, so Chino Hills had a close call against Jefferson in New York. You know, they had a close call against TJ Leaf, Alonzo Ball's buddy.
That's right.
You know, in a game with his team down in San Diego, really close game. They could have won that game. And I think it started building on each other. Everybody knows LeVar Ball and all the things. Like, honestly, if they would have dropped one of those games, none of that might have happened. Like, that's how close and crazy it is. So you got to give the 24 Montverde team credit in their time and in their space against their opponents. And same thing with 83 Dunbar. You know, I want to let people know you can listen to episode 62. We had representatives from each of those 4 teams talking about the team, the history. Obviously, we don't have time to spend much on that, but it's just awesome to talk about that. I think I'm with you, Ani, and to answer Chelsea's original question, it's going to be the 20 Montverde team already has 6 NBA players. It's only 5 years ago, or 4 years ago and 5 seasons ago. Like, that's insane. That's an insane number. 3 is an insane number. We thought 3 was a crazy number 10, 15 years ago. So when you start talking about 4 and 5 and 6, that's not really supposed to happen at the high school level. Like, that's just crazy. You know, you have 2 NBA players, like, or 3, that's crazy. With the team I think about is like Jalen Rose's team with Howard Isley and Bashan Leonard. Those Howard Isley and Bashan Leonard are good. That was like, wow. Now you're looking at this Montverde team, they're doubling that. And those guys, like you said, are all rotational players, all getting big contracts. It's just amazing where that program has gone. But Chelsea, I think for you, and I'll ask you this, do you like to wait and look at teams, like you said, 10 years down the line to see how they did? Or like, is it more like how good they were in real time to talk about them in real time?
I mean, I definitely think real time. I definitely think I'm a little bit of a prisoner of the moment because I have not, deep dive into this space as much as you guys have. But I want to ask you though, I think Mount Verde's going to get 2 NBA guys minimum, and they might be able to from that team from last year. I mean, Cooper Flag, obviously, he's going to be in. Derek Queen, I know people aren't super high on him, but I am, and I feel like he could be a formidable NBA player. I don't think he's going to be a star, but I can see him making a roster just from what I saw. So 2 minimum. And do you guys think anybody else on that team could be fortunate enough to make it?
I think Asa Newell will be an NBA player.
Okay, so they got 3 then, Ani. I'm getting there.
Yeah, I think Derek Queen, as unorthodox as he is and maybe non-traditional in today's game, will get an NBA chance because he's going to be productive. He's productive. He's skilled. He knows how to pass, and he has really good footwork and touch. So I mean, he's going to have the opportunity. Asa Newell, I would definitely say, like seeing him have Formula Zero. Just kind of hearing about how he's been playing in practices and exhibitions, I think he'll definitely have a chance to be a lottery pick, to be honest with you. And then obviously Cooper Flag is projected number 1, and we'll see how that goes. And I think he probably will. But yeah, I think they'll definitely have 3. I think Derek Queen, if he's not a one and done, no brainer 2 and done. But I think all 3 are projected to be 1 and done this year.
So I like my pick. We're going to see how it fares out. What do you think, Ronnie? Real quick, I'll let you.
Real quick, it's just I think Robert Wright's terrific. I know he didn't make the McDonald's game, but like you said, they had 5 quality McDonald's All-Americans, and he's going to Baylor, right, Ani? I just think they do a good job, developing in a short period of time, and he's going to. I really like him. So shout out to Rob. But again, I like to talk about the teams in the real time too, and that's what. But this year we can say. We'll see where Mount Verde lands. We talk about some of the other teams, top teams. Like they're only compared, and they only have to play this year's crop of teams. So that's all they got to do. You got to win a state title or win a Chipotle Nationals. You only got to do it against who you're facing, not against hypotheticals. So with all due respect, we got to give some respect to this year's team and these guys in this year and see how they pan out. You don't always have to have multiple NBA players to have a great high school team.
Right, 100%.
Right, because Chino Hills, they had all the Ball brothers, solidified NBA player. Lonzo's still kind of figuring things out, working his way back. LaMelo, I feel like, is just trending up and on his way to becoming a star. If he didn't get hurt, could have happened last year. I mean, he's really good. Talented. But when we look back against these teams, I think Mount Verde, my team, is going to be right there. I really feel like it. And I'm high on Rob Wright too, even though he's small. It's just tough for small guards to make the league, but I think he's a good player. So we'll see how it works out. Okay, let's move on. Let's dive into the purpose of the rankings, why we were here, why we do it. Ronnie, I'll let you touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, the graphic is there and it's very, self-explanatory. I think for the most part, basketball, there's obviously 30 games. You can play against each other. There's national tournaments. It's the most barometers to measure, team A beat team B, team B beat team C. So team A is better than team C. That kind of logic, right? And Ani likes to point to this now. Like the high school game is a national game. This is not no joke. Money's involved. TV's involved. National TV appearance. Branding is involved. Growing your brand. Having even maybe an endorsement deal before you get to college. This is big time. So it's just not what we saw 15 years ago. Like it's a national game. It's elite. People know the teams from around the country. They follow them. Their social media. People in North Carolina know teams in California, and teams in California know teams in Florida. That's just the way it is. And it adds interest to the game. And I think the talent we talk about, the Cooper Flags, AJ Dynastas, the Cameron Boozers, these guys are public figures and they're well known.
Yeah, definitely. I think just, speaking to the landscape and what we see today, like you have to start early on these kids. Yeah. Like, I'm not into, labeling these kids right off the bat. We talked a lot about it on previous episodes of how we, kind of put these labels on kids. But, basketball is very much a business. Like you said, they're starting early. These kids are public figures in high school. Social media is totally just blown up. and people want to follow them throughout their career and, see how it pans out and see their trajectories and, ultimately see what they become. So how about how to get ranked? So we gave the purpose of what we're doing here, but let's dive into a little bit of how a team can get ranked before we start breaking down our selection of teams. Ani, what do you think is the most important factor? Returning players or recent success in when you're ranking a team?
I think returning players, obviously, is number one. Then with recent success, right? Obviously, on here it talks about play the strongest schedule possible, which I think is big. Defeat a ranked team. On the head-to-head victories, obviously that determines where you get ranked or if you get in there or earn a high ranking and state in your region. Root for your rivals. I like that, Ronnie. That's yeah, definitely root for your rivals. Dominate non-power state. Like the smaller states, you got to be dominant. You definitely have to win that state title. And have a top recruit on your team. I mean, at the end of the day, this game's about players, right? So the high-level players, generally, what are going to help you beat the ranked teams or, be able to compete in the strongest schedule possible. But I definitely think it's returning. It's just returning guys, especially on the traditional school front, like I mentioned earlier. And then with your recent success, that determines if you make the preseason. After that, then, you just got to play. You just got to play and you got to win. And, that's what kind of gets you in there, maybe on the outside looking in, get you in there. Then you just kind of have to fight your way. But in the preseason, this is all about returning what you return, what you added, and recent success.
So do you think based off of that list, have those always been, Ronnie, the prerequisites to how to get ranked? Or do you think it's very much feeding into the current landscape, with social media and everything going on? Are your rankings when you're going through these lists of teams changing with the times and how you evaluate?
I think so. I think 20 years ago when you had to call a school or, hopefully you had a coach had a cell phone, and it's like you kind of got the programs from the state tournament the year before, or you knew, hey, that team has 4 starters back, to Ani's point. 4 starters, 8 lettermen. That used to be big. 3 starters, 2 all-state, 9 lettermen. Ooh, this team was 25-1. Now it's like you got to see where they're going. And we do have some October surprises. Guys are moving late. School's already started. So it's definitely changed. Before where we do the rankings earlier, especially when like Doug Huff would have his rankings in Street and Smiths, or like, you had your rankings in a magazine, Chelsea, you had to meet a deadline,
Yeah.
So, preseason Athlons or Lindy's or Street and Smiths, those things were dropping in September and you had to come out with your list. So it was definitely more to the Ani's point, to the returners, to the strength you had. Now it's to the level you play. Now I could even look into the schedules more with all the, the Thanksgiving Hoop Fest, Hoopsgiving in Atlanta, events like that. Fight for the Flight now in Utah is a great event in early November. Who you play is now very important early in November, December, much more than it was 20 years ago and definitely 30 years ago. The talent level is the same. You got to have the best players. I don't think that's changed over the years. Mm-hmm. One funniest example is Crenshaw High in 93, 94. Everybody thought, Oak Hill was going to start number 1 because everybody thought Kevin Garnett was going to go there as a junior because he was going to leave South Carolina, his small hometown school, and he was a phenomenal talent. So everybody thought he was going to go to Oak Hill. So again, it's published in a magazine. Kevin Garnett's going to Oak Hill. Well, he didn't leave for Oak Hill. So when the rankings came out later, after all the magazines, Crenshaw was number 1 and not Oak Hill. And then then the season went on from there. To Ani's point, Crenshaw lost 2 games and they finished like 3 or 4. But he never transferred there, so that's kind of a misnomer. Like he didn't come and then he went to Chicago his senior year, but people thought he was going to go to Oak Hill's junior year. So more information, more timely information, faster information. Have to be on top of it. Like literally, we have to be on top of it to this past weekend. We'll talk about it later, but there's a guy who just transferred this past weekend. Yeah. So that changes things. But I'm still with Ani. I like the roster. And if you have a 20-0 JV team moving up, one guy that's a 9th grader that was just skinny or maybe he wasn't ready, and he's going to give you something. That's pretty awesome too. When you know you have a guy who's coming on. So it's changed a little bit, and you just have to be more on top of it. And I still like the traditional, especially for the bottom tier schools, of how many guys they have.
Got you. Okay, well let's jump into the bottom tier. We always like to start on the back end, and we're going to go through teams 31 through 50 first. You just talked about how difficult it is to rank traditional teams, and just with the constant movement, you guys can see the teams scrolling. A couple notables: Oak Hill, Wasatch Academy at 40, Notre Dame, Tyron Stokes, big time recruit there. As those goes Duncanville 47, and rounding out 50 to Tino Grace. So what stands out to you? I'll go with you first, Ani. Who pops out to you on this screen? And again, like I said, I love this segment because this is where I feel teams can make a name for themselves. They have the opportunity to move up. Hey, if you start at the bottom of the pack and you win and you climb and you do good things, who knows where you can end up at the end of the season. So Ani, tell me who speaks to you.
Owasso being at 36 is very interesting. Obviously, they won the state title at the highest level in Oklahoma this past season. Having Jalen Montanati, top 15 talent in the country in 226, and then have the big fella that committed to St. Louis, drawing a blank. But they've added some pieces. They added some more guard play. They're actually playing in my event this upcoming weekend, which is actually pretty cool. It would be a good for me to see him against some high-level talent. I actually have him against Faith Family in an exhibition this weekend. So seeing Owasso, seeing how some of the additions they have, seeing Jalen Montanati makes that next step. They bumped their schedule up this year. I know they're going to be playing in the City of Palms. They're going to be playing more of a national loaded schedule. So I think them at 36, I don't know if it goes up or down, but I think this year is going to be a big test to see where they're actually at and where some of those guys are at. So 37 is a good spot for a team that's won a state title last year and they returned the core guys. But now going to see them in a national, playing national schedule, I'm interested to see if they hold their own and they can move up. And then I'll have one more, and I'm biased, Dallas guy, Faith Family at 36. I think Faith Family is actually really loaded. They got some guys like Lamont Hartfield. They got Davion Atkins. Then they just picked up a guard from Michigan that's in there that I think solidifies the PG position. And King Grace, who committed to Mississippi State. I think this season they kind of turned around. They won multiple state titles, but from a national level, right? They're going to win a state title when they were at 4A. It's not that hard. They're in 5A. We still project them to win it all. But from the national schedule, I think they're going to win more games this year. So I think they're the team for me that could potentially move up. But more importantly, I think Owasso.
Ronnie, what about you? Who do you like?
These teams are very good. I was going to mention a team on the rise. Ani says they're 36. They start 38. I think they're going to go up. They've been in that range for the last 4 years. Just last year, they had a little too many total losses, so they had to drop. But they've been starting in 31, 33, 34. And like Ani said, they've been rolling their state title, but their schedule is so tough. When you talk about Faith Family, now they're in 5A, but they just had a little too many losses. And with King Grace and Davion Atkins, to me that team has a chance to rise. So that'd be my team on the rise in this group. I don't want to forget about Duncanville. I think they were young. They're still kind of young. They had 9 freshmen and sophomores last year at 47. I don't want to forget about them. They've been ranked in our FAB 50 for 6 straight years now. That's pretty impressive for a public team, UIL public team, and any public team. So. Give a shout out to Coach Peavy. A lot of good teams in this range, but I think they're on the move. Again, they're not in the same division in the state playoffs when we get there, so they'll both have their chances.
Gotcha. Okay, well, you guys told me in the rankings that it's about the players, so I want to lean in a little bit on Notre Dame. They have Tyron Stokes coming in. He's going to play for them this year. He's obviously a highly ranked recruit in 2026. So talk to me, guys, about what you see from him as a player and how you think he's going to help this team this season.
Oh, yeah, definitely. When you talk about Tyron Stokes, you look at someone that's 6'7". He's a big wing. He kind of fits the modern day wing with his body. He can shoot. He can put the ball on the floor. He has really good feel as a passer. He plays with the edge about him and a confidence. Sometimes people think he's a little overconfident, but I think that's what makes him really good. As you're seeing here, just getting to the lane, using his body to navigate through traffic and finishing. We've seen him make shots from deep. I just love his toughness. I think he just brings a lot of versatility on the floor. And someone with that size be able to, even in the high school level, guard multiple positions, play multiple positions offensively, but also generate shots for others is huge. And I think that's a big get for Notre Dame, obviously, to have him, because Notre Dame, they're very good. They have good guard play. They have a really a wing that I like. I don't remember his name, Ronnie, but he gets a lot of shit done, and he rebounds, he makes shots. And I think with adding Tyron Stokes, you got somebody that just adds more versatility and has toughness that's needed to play at a national level and defeat ranked teams at the end of the day.
Yeah, to follow up on that, Chelsea, he mentioned kind of guys who do some dirty work, and they're going to have to step up. That's Zach White, 226. He's just very good on the boards. Doesn't worry about shooting the ball, and I think his recruitment's going to take off. He's his dad played in the NFL for a little while, Russell White, a high school legend running back, and you got to forget they have a point guard, and he's going to Rutgers, and that's Angelino Mark is a great player, and another reason they may do good and jump up from this 42 spot they're in. Obviously, their league, they play in the same league with Harvard Westlake, who's been nationally ranked the last few years. Sierra Canyon, who may be a little down, but you have to still beat them, and they usually are tough. Is that Tyron Stokes has been in a cast in this fall and to start the season. So those other guys are going to get together, play together. They're going to have to carry the load, and then when he comes back, hopefully we see him at Tarkani. And if not, we'll see him at the beginning of 225. The team will be much better for that experience, whether it's 10 games or playing those games in November and December without him. And then when they get back, it's like, wow, we'll be ready to go. So, we're talking about a guy who might be. Some people think he's number one or number two, maybe number one in that class. So you're adding a big time player. And he's going to be in the spotlight. A lot of cameras are going to be on him in LA. So they definitely have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes. To Ani's point, I'm high on this kid. I got to watch him a lot in EYBL sessions this past summer when he was playing for the Soldiers, and he's super talented. So, I think any coach would be happy to add a piece like that to their team. But moving on, let's talk about teams that are in the hot seat. You guys told me teams on the rise who you think could be coming out of the bottom of the pack. But let's talk about teams that you could get tricky for them. I'll start with you, Ronnie.
Yeah, the team that could get tricky is one spot be Notre Dame. And go back to Notre Dame real quick. They're going to play Columbus January 18th. So they're going to have their chances.
Yeah.
It seems like half the country's playing Columbus this year. Like, we're playing Columbus. I'm like, you're playing Columbus too? Like, dang, how many games do these guys have? But to the point is, right below them, we have Cathedral of Indianapolis. They have Brady Kohler, a great player. And we've had Cathedral in that range before. He's going to Notre Dame. He's a top 100 player. They have a great high school team. And, they did really good in June. Chelsea in the June Scholastic period, they went 22-0. They even beat our number 44 team. So it just worked out that way. Richmond Heights from Ohio. So 42 Notre Dame, 43 them. And that's all great and dandy in the live period. And I know that helped their players individually. But, you got to get it done in the Indiana State tournament. And them being in 3A, they don't have very much leeway. 4A is the top classification in Indiana. They don't have much leeway in state. They can't drop a game here or two, or we had a bad game. They've been in this spot before, so they kind of got to get it done. And at the end of the season, when it matters, we started them number 13 in 2023 when they had Xavier Booker, who's now at Michigan State, and they started regionally ranked last year, and they didn't win the state title. So they're kind of like to the point. They're on the heights that the pressure's on. They got to win. They got a good team. They're coming off a good summer. They have 2 transfers that are good. They have experience, so they got 5 starters back. It's time to get it done. Yeah,
I'll be excited to see what happens with Cathedral. And what about you, Ani? Who do you have on your hot seat?
Wasatch. Just because Isaiah Harwell is not going to, we'll see when he actually gets back into play. I know he's recovering from a torn ACL. If it takes some time, obviously, if it takes a few more months till you see him 100%, who is their go-to guy, especially with the schedule that they're playing in the league that they're playing in, right? What does that look like? So maybe they stay in the 40s, maybe they're out of it. But I think with not knowing exactly when he's coming back, I have Wasatch in the hot seat of just, in the hot seat that they may be falling off until, he can kind of get back, and maybe later down in the season when he's healthy and they're peaking in the right time, they come back in it and they're a top 30 level team. But I think early on it's going to be a struggle. Obviously, they got Control Harmon, they got Augustine Ekwe, they're talented, but at that level, the league they're playing in, you kind of need I ain't gonna just say the word, the MFer, right? And I think that's that's Isaiah Harwell. And without him, what does that team look like in the first few months of the season?
Okay, we'll see how it goes. I think that's it for 31 through 50. Before we wrap up, I do want to remind our viewers, everybody who tunes into the show, we appreciate you. I just want to let you guys know, make sure you share our Fab 50 show on YouTube as much as you possibly can. The season doesn't get started in every part of the country for another couple of weeks. So make sure after we sign off that you check out the written version. Rankings will be on ballislife.com, and share our show with your high school hoop heads. We'd really appreciate it. It will be live on Ballislife Podcast Network, and it'll be a valuable reference to you guys all year. Tap back in with us. Make sure Ani and Ronnie are on their stuff. You guys are listening to their rankings and what they're saying about these teams. Don't be afraid to, pull their card if they end up being wrong, guys.
Hey, we stay right, Ronnie. The only thing I will just say this. I think we missed on Allen High School out of Dallas. I think they're a top 50 team. I think that was the only team I feel like.
You always bring in a Texas team in the mix. What do you think about them, Ronnie? Because you're not as biased as Ani when it comes.
I am biased. I'm biased
on the show. Let's just keep going on the show, and we'll bring it out. So.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 191 of the In the Paint show. We have our season 7 kickoff, Fab 50, where we recognize the top high school teams in the country. We already gave you guys teams 31 through 50. Now we're going to jump into our second segment, teams 16 through 30. This is another level up, guys. These are the teams with more depth, maybe a tougher strength of schedule, maybe some more key players that we didn't hit on that are going to, have a chance to elevate their team. And we're going to see if they're able to climb in the rankings, just like we discussed teams 31 through 50. So we're going to get them up on the board. A lot of notable names this year. A couple that jump out to me: Brewster Academy at 17, 19, Harvard Westlake, Dream City Christian out of Arizona. I think they're going to be a decent team this year. And Allen, Texas at 27. So talk to me, guys, about what you're seeing in 16 through 30. I'll start with you, Ronnie.
Yeah, 16 through 30, I think you see teams that had good success last year. Teams as Harvard Westlake won their state title. Number 20, John Marshall. Oak Ridge was right there. Lost to Columbus in the state semifinals on a last-second bucket by Cameron Boozer. Reese, the point guard, had a chance to hit it, rim in and out. So, the difference between margin and losing and winning is very tight here. These teams have good college size, level size. Mm-hmm. Usually you're going to travel across the country and usually come play tough teams. As you see, Paul, the 6, number 23, and St. John's 28, they're in the same league. So I think you see high-level players, college-level size, and difference makers, as you said, Chelsea.
What about you, Ani? What do you think stands out in this group that separates them from the 31 through 50 teams?
I just think it's not necessarily depth. I think the depth for sure, but I think it's just the high-level players. There's more than some of these teams. It's one real standout. With majority of these schools, it's they have 2 or 3 top 50 to 75 level players in their class. Sure. So that's kind of the difference that I see in this. But depth, I really do see the depth. I think these teams can go 10 guys, can play a game of 9 to 10 guys and be very effective. I think some of these the schools in the 31 through 50, you know, they're probably like doing a real 7-man rotation in the tight game. I think these teams can actually do 8, 9. I doubt really 10. Maybe I'm over exaggerated, but definitely a good 8 to 9 guys, and that's where the depth comes in. But I think at the top of the top players, a majority of them you're seeing are top 75 level players in their class.
Nice. Okay, so Ronnie, let's jump in. Give me your team on the rise in this group.
Yeah, my team on the rise in this group, I think, would be Paul VI out of Chantilly, Virginia. They've been in the nationally ranked hunt. You know, just 2 years ago, they had rose to number 1. Last year, they were top 3 to 4 the whole season. Yes, they lost a lot of firepower. We know some of the great players they've moved on. As almost as much as, besides Montverde, they've lost probably as much as anybody. But they built their program, you know, Coach Williams and Coach Farella to an incredible level. And I just really like Jordan Smith. I think he's going to lead this team. The young guys are going to buy in. And even though they might finish second in the conference, they're going to beat a lot of teams in this range. And I think they're going to beat some teams above them. I know you guys saw Jordan Smith on the EYBL. I believe he's on the Takeover 16s.
Yep, team Takeover. He's just
a leader extraordinaire. And I just think he's one of the best defenders in the country. And the guys are going to get behind him. They have a lot of good talent. And they have some good depth, but I just think he's the leader of that group. And when it comes down to it, you know, that they're gonna do some things. Some of the other guys they have are Jaquan Womack, committed to Townsend, Adlan Elamin, committed to Utah State. Utah State has a great recruiting class. Some of the younger guys, Lawrence Turk Brown, Troy Tomlin, and 227 is well known, and Cooper Sundra 6'8". They got depth still, even though it's not as much talent nationally known. Paul VI is going to be a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I'm really high on the Jordan Smith kid. I'm excited to see how he plays out this season. And Ani, give me your team on the rise.
I think Harvard Westlake. Really enjoy like watching like Duke commit Nicholas Kamenia. They got Joe Sterling, who is the talk of the town right now, especially at after Border League, which I didn't make it, but I saw plenty of highlights. I just like how they play together. They got shooting, they got size, they got really stable guard play. And again, like when you talk about Nicholas Kamenia, who adds versatility at his size, who can really defend, step out, handle it, play, make, score, guys that are that cerebral with talent around him that know their role and excel in their role. I think they have a chance to be a top 15 level team and could potentially crack the top 10 this season. That's how good I think this squad can be.
I can see that. The Joe Sterling kid is really good. I actually know his trainer, Clint Parks, and, you know, he's been working with him since he was a kid. And, you know, the work is the work. I mean, it's definitely paying off. And he did his thing. They played against, I think, OTE in Border League. And he was kind of having his way versus a lot of 5-star recruits out there. So that was fun to see. Let's keep going. Talk to me, Ronnie, about your team that's on the hot seat.
Ani mentioned it. Depth. These teams have depth. And these teams, you know, can go to, if a guy gets in foul trouble, they can go to somebody else. I think the team that is on the hot seat with that in mind would be number 29 Millennium. They lost some depth in the offseason. They have a great core, but they lost some depth. 1-2 punch they have is really good, including Holmes, who we all know is a great junior. But they got to show they can win against a tough schedule, overcome that heartbreak. And in Arizona, Perry is kind of like leading the pack. We're kind of giving away a higher ranked team, but it doesn't matter because Perry's won 3 straight state titles in Arizona, and Millennium had a 17-point lead. That's hard to overcome sometimes. Now I know they had a great Section 7 and they had a great Border League showing at the Border League. They have a good team, but 3 guys on their bench transferred out. And again, so the stars of the team are really going to have to, you know, do their job for them to keep in that range and hold off Sandra Day O'Connor and teams like Sunny Slope in Arizona. Arizona's very good now, whether it's the independent kind of academy teams or you talk about the teams in the state association, they're very good. So those 4 or 5 teams I mentioned, Sandra Day O'Connor, Sunny Slope, Millennium don't have it easy. Kingston Toshi, again, we talked about Utah State. Utah State has a great recruiting class, everybody. Go look them up and see who's coming to Utah State. You talk about getting the job done. Kudos to their coaching staff. Kingston Toshi, 6'7", he had a great summer. Cam Holmes, who most people know is Deron Holmes' younger brother. Obviously, we wish Deron Holmes a speedy recovery as he recovers from his injuries. He joined the NBA. He's a top 20 guy. He was an underclass All-American as a sophomore last year. But those two guys are going to be relied on a lot. They have some new players that are good. Jalen Jeremy, he's good. Quincy Everson are good guards that we saw at the Border League. JT Adams is the coach's son. But those 5 or 6 guys, they rely on a lot, Ani. And to move up from this point, like you said, 29, to last the schedule they took on and are taking, is it really means something. So that's my team on the hot seat. They'll get their chance down at City of Palms, as many teams, nationally ranked teams go. But, they're going to face Montverde Academy in that quarterfinal, and they go to Bass Pro later in the school year. So they got their work cut out.
We'll see how it plays out. Ani, go ahead and give me your hot seat team.
No, I agree with Ronnie with Millennial. Sorry. I think depth. I think the stay in the top 30 is going to be very tough because they have to rely so heavily on 5 to 6 guys. For me, it's number 30, Brendan. Losing Delano Tarpley, the big fella. That hurts as far as like the size depth. As we know how key that is when you're playing the nationally level teams. Obviously, they have Kingston Flemings. They have Cal Gill. They got Donovan Chris. They got Isaiah Ward. So Cam Cowgill, by the way. But so they have 4 guys that are, that really play their role. Obviously, Kingston leads that. But I don't think they have enough depth to just stay in there in the top 30 and even rise. I think we're going to see them fall. I think losing Delano hurts, not necessarily because he was just such a dominant player, but he was a true big that kind of helped them out when they played against, like when they played like a Link or whoever. Like Delano was just helpful, just being a body, that big body that could score and had touch and size. So losing him and not really having like a true replacement, that's big for me. And listen, I talked about Allen. I'm happy to see Allen at 27. You know what I mean? We were
waiting for you to talk about your team, Ani.
He's talking about Allen in the first segment. He's like, "Where's Allen? Where's Allen?"
I thought you were messing with me, bro. I had to make sure. You had it right. I had to make sure you had it right. Shout out to Allen, though. No, for sure. I don't know if they're a team on the rise or in the hot seat. I just think they're in a good place right now, and we'll just see kind of how the season goes and if how much noise they can make. But I think that's a good start for them.
Ani, to jump in there, we do the list here. Again, there might be another Texas team out. I don't know, but Allen would be 1, Brennan would be 2, Faith would be 3 based on that list. Does that make sense? Again, we'll talk about the bubble later, but you really are putting a lot of heat on Brennan. Mm-hmm. Is that because they haven't got it done yet? They've been looking forward to this season, even next, and winning that 6A is a monster. Just talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't won it yet, but mind you, it's a tough road to win a 6A title in Texas. I mean, we have Plano East that didn't lose a game all season last year, that won it all. I think it's going to be tough. I think the road to it's easier in 6A than it has been in the past. So I do think they have an opportunity to win it. It's just how they're going to fare early on when they're not in district play, when they don't have to be in the playoffs. I just think that non-district schedule is going to be a beast for them. I think they'll be able to kind of hold their own, but just because they don't have as much size depth as they've had before, I think that's where the struggle comes.
Got it.
I'm with you, Ani. Let's talk a little bit about a team that might maybe creep their way into the top 15. We have Brewster Academy at 17, and I heard they have a must-see TV player. Ani, talk to me about a player to watch on Brewster Academy.
Oh, we got Aristide, right? That's what we talk.
Dwayne Aristide.
Dwayne Aristide. Yeah, Dwayne Aristide. And when you talk about him, like someone with his size, I love versatility. I love guys with size that can do multiple things on the court, that can score the basketball. I think he's someone that has really come a long ways, especially in that class. Like, I think he's borderline the top 10, top 12 player in his class nationally. I think Dwayne just brings a lot offensively, especially with perimeter scoring. I think he can really guard most positions in the high school level, and I think he will be he will in the collegiate level. But I just like his scoring prowess. I like that he's really kind of matured as far as his playmaking. I'm not saying he's like a big-time playmaker, but I think his passing has improved, how he moves without the basketball, and how he can just do stuff with the ball in his hands. I think all that's getting better. His body's getting better, and I think he's in a – you can tell with how he's playing, it's like he's mentally and physically ready to lead a top 15 team in the country.
Nice. What about you, Ron? Do you have anybody?
Yeah, well, to follow up on that, they got a great team, like you said. Don't forget about Preston Fowler. He's going to James Madison. Sebastian Wilkins had a really great year, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about them because they're in that league. So we obviously, if you guys are following the rankings so far, we got 15 teams to go. Like, you already know there's 3 or 4 teams from the EYBL Scholastic we mentioned. Mm-hmm. So that means there's probably about 3 or 4 left, so you're in the middle of that pack. You're 7-4 in league, or 8-3. Will that get it done? Chelsea, you said there may not be no dominant team. Maybe there's no team like Montverde that goes 11-0. This year they're gonna everybody's not gonna play 2 teams, so 11 conference games. You don't play 2 of the teams. Is somebody gonna go 11-0? I don't know. They've seen a lot of balance, and like you said, if you fall back to 6-5, are you in 4th or 5th place? You can still be nationally ranked, but they shout out to them because they joined the high school ranks last year. Meaning Brewsters had always been in the NEPSAC, the New England Preparatory League. They've been around 100 years. They've been in that New England Prep League for over 50 years. So they're not nothing new. I think some of our traditional fans are like, I don't like to talk about the prep schools that much. I like the Allens and the Notre Dames of the world, but Brewster's been around a long time. Shout out to Coach Jason Smith. They've had a lot of great players, but they want a high school team without the postgraduates, so they joined the Scholastic, and it's going to be a dogfight. And I think they have the horses, like Ani mentioned, to be right there, maybe move up. Maybe they don't move down, but they're going to be right in it. And right. I really like them. And as far as a player in this group, I think you go one spot ahead, a team that's doing really good. 16 Sidwell Friends. They finished 29 last year. Point guard Caden Lewis. He might be one of the best players in this group of teams we're talking about. I mean, he was terrific at NBA Players Association. We see it here. I think he elevated his game. Of all the ranking services now, I'm not really worried about the ranking services that much, but they have him at 28. I think he can be an All-American this year.
Wow.
You just show what he did. Most of these highlights are from one game. Like, Caden's just really good. And they have a good all-around team. They play a tough schedule. They're looking for a berth in Chipotle so they can be one of the non-EYBL Scholastic teams. They play in the DC National Hoop Fest, the John Wall Invitational. So they're going to be around, and I really like what he brings to the table. He made that all tournament team at the NBA Players Association of the 12 guys, top 12 of all the campers there. And I just like Sidwell, what he brings to that team and their toughness and their DC grit, and he leads the way.
Nice. Yeah, excellent player. It'll be interesting to see what he's able to do with the team. Since we got through 3/4 of, I guess, our rankings, I want to, take a second to kind of go a little bit through the guidelines and how we reached that. You talked about the Scholastic League and the players that you're having and who you're playing. Ronnie, break down the guidelines of these rankings so our viewers can just kind of understand how we come to these conclusions.
Yeah, and there's, 6 guidelines there that are general. You can read them on, I'll read them off real quick. 8-semester rule. Age cutoff, recognized by a high school governing body. That's important. We just don't want people say, "Oh yeah, I'm adding this kid in February." It's like, what? You got to follow some guidelines. Some guidelines are being a governing body associate member. You don't have to play for a state title, but you got to follow some guidelines. League or conference membership is important. Everybody's part of some kind of league, so they answer to somebody. You can't just do what you want. And I'll let Ani go a little bit more on the, the roster maintaining the amateur status, but that's the final one. You're not paying. You have NIL. You want to sign a Gatorade deal, if you want to sign a Nike deal, if you want to sign a deal with Chipotle, have at it. I think that's great. And this is where we are in 224, 225, but you're not getting paid to play. Like nobody's paying you to play. If you're paying to play, you're not on a high school team, in my opinion.
Right. You're more of I would say professional, but I guess in college, that's kind of what they're doing now. So, but yeah, you're not really a high school team. Now we know it goes on, right? But
sure,
but if it if it's not public, you threw it under the table. It's all good. All right, but yeah, obviously, if it's just a pay to play type situation, obviously, then your team won't be under Fab 50.
Gotcha. And Ronnie, are there any like gray areas with some of these guidelines where might be up in the air for a team that think they should be eligible? Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, the gray areas I think over the years is people don't know the National Federation of High School Association recommends rules, recommends things such as the shot clock, and recommends things such as the age cutoff. The age cutoff is pretty high, meaning you can be pretty old. I know Chelsea, that's
wait, how old, Ronnie?
June 15th in some states before you were born, June 15th is the cutoff. So if you turn June 15th before, the start of your senior year, you're not eligible. So, that's pretty late. Some are July 15th, which is a little better. Some are August 1st. Turning 19 before August 1st, that means
that's a problem.
You're at 19 and a half, So I know you don't really like that. It's not a national rule. So that's where the gray area comes. You got to set the rule. You got to set the date, but it's pretty high. The age cutoff is pretty high. I'll give you an example for that age cutoff. And we talk about, besides the Scholastic, we talk about the grind session teams, and we have a few grind session teams. And that is pretty high. And I'll get to it here in a second, but it's let me find the date real quick. It's August 1st. So can't turn 19 before August 1st. That's again, so some are June 15th, some are August 1st. And I think that's where the gray area comes. And Chelsea, I know you'd probably wish that was probably moved up a little bit, maybe to March 1st.
Yeah.
We are. That's pretty old. Most people are 17 back in your days. Some even barely turning 17. Now we have kids that are 19 going into their senior year.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And honestly, I'm all for guidelines. Like you talk about recommendations of the shot clock. Like I think that needs to become very much so mandatory. Like, this is elite level basketball. If we want to prepare these kids for the next level, like that's just an adjustment that kind of has to be made. And, you guys could probably argue some other things that need to be implemented. But if that's the goal, is sending these kids off to college, like we need to put them in the best position. So I'm definitely here for guidelines. I like who we have with that segment of teams. I just want to remind everybody, I know we don't have a whole bunch of special guests, this time around, not doing a whole bunch of interviews, but we have detailed breakdowns of each teams on ballislife.com. So make sure you are going to check those write-ups, check for key players, look for players that you're interested in learning more about. There'll be tons of insight and names to follow. So ballislife.com, don't forget to check it out. If you just want a little bit more detail about, some of the teams and some of the players that we're talking about today.
Yeah, no doubt. Happy Halloween, everybody. This is the 31st. So hopefully everybody has a good night and has a good Halloween. And, we'll come back on the 1st for the last segment, the big boys, and all the teams. And we'll I know we like to talk about the top teams, and we'll spend some time talking about them.
This is it, guys. We've reached the end of episode 191, featuring our top teams in this year's 2024-2025 FAB 50 top high school teams across the country. And I present to you teams 1 through 15. I know everybody is excited. The anticipation is building up. Just kind of rolling down the list. Obviously, Columbus at number 1, Link Academy at number 2, Mount Verde, IMG 4, AZ Compass 5, Long Island Lutheran 6. Gonzaga comes in at number 7. Prolific Prep at number 8. 9 is La Lumiere. 10, Roosevelt. 11, Perry. 12, Grayson. 13, St. John Bosco. 14, Utah Prep. 15, St. Mary's Prep. So what stands out to you guys? Obviously, I had a little excitement when I said Utah Prep because this is a new entry to the top 15 this year, guys. Talk to me about what stands out. First thoughts, Ani.
Yeah, definitely number 1. Obviously, just It's a little bit of like who's number one with Link as loaded of a squad as they have this season. And Columbus, who actually added another player in Caleb Gaskins, who left Montverde. But Columbus at 1, I definitely think that's just a real eye-opening deal. I think they're loaded. Obviously, the Boozer twins. You have Jackson Richardson, adding Caleb Gaskins and just more depth. I mean, they're loaded. They're loaded. I think them and Link is going to be a battle 1 and 2 all year. That's just my opinion personally. Utah Prep. I mean, you say top 15. I think it's the first time they've ever been added in the top 50. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. I haven't seen it before, but I know they
right. They're a new program. They're a fairly new program, so that makes sense. And now, obviously, having AJ Adebanta and just seeing how their season goes, you know, obviously they have no one player in the country that JJ Mandequit. They have a few pieces, but can they stay in the top 50? I know I'm a little ahead of myself as far as the hot seat, but they just really stand out for me. Seeing them in the top 15, obviously they have a really good border league, right? But seeing how that goes about throughout the whole year, but definitely Columbus at 1, because for most people that I've talked to, they all feel it's Link. But I think we're really underrating how good this Columbus team is. And even though they lost in the Border League, to me, championships aren't won in October, right? So when it's a full game, everybody's locked in, roles are completely defined, game plans and all that, I think we're just going to see a completely different team. So Columbus at 1, I definitely agree with, and I'm happy that we have them at 1 instead of Link. But shout out to Link. I definitely think Columbus deserves that number 1 spot.
What about you, Ronnie? First thoughts?
Yeah, and I know what Ronnie meant there. It's good to see a team that's just a high school team. It doesn't happen very often. You know, my first thought is Columbus is number 1. I want to let people know they were number 1. Getting Caleb Gaskins doesn't change them to number 1. Like Ani said, they have more depth. They have another weapon. They have a mid-range shooter now, a guy who could defend 3, 4, maybe even a 5, a guy who can do a lot. Caleb Gaskins, I think, is going to have a really good season for the Explorers when time comes. But I just think people see Montverde at number 3. I know Chelsea, when we were talking about that in the preseason, you were like, well, I don't know, you know, they did not maybe as highly level as we thought. But like we said earlier in the show, we're only comparing them to this group of teams, not the historical group or last year's team. They don't want to have to worry about that. And I want people to know that, I don't think even with Montverde's track record, they're 29-6 at Chipotle over the years. It's like an 850 winning percentage. Mm-hmm. I don't think I can start them below AZ Compass or Lou High or La Lu right now, even though they lost Caleb. They've proven that they can win until somebody starts beating them consistently. Again, we're looking at, you know, Link at 2, Montverde at 3, IMG at 4, Arizona at 5, Lou High at 6, La Lu at 7. That's 6 teams in the top, 15 from one conference. So that means you could be in 6th place and be in the top 15. So it's like you got to put that in perspective, how good these teams are. So that means look how good those other teams are. Bosco, Roosevelt, Perry, with our guy Koa Pete, St. Mary Prep. I just think those teams have the schedule, have the great player, and going to have the opportunity. You know, obviously, like Ani said, Link has the personnel. So now it's just a matter of they get it done.
Yeah, Ani says Link has the personnel, but Columbus was right at number 1. And that is probably in big part by Cameron Boozer. So let's take a look at him. I want you guys to talk to me about what makes him so great. He's leading Columbus alongside his brother. Super talented, big time player. I believe they both committed to Duke recently. So talk to me. I'll start with you, Ronnie. Talk to me about Cameron Boozer.
Yeah, I think we get caught up a lot in the where's this guy's going, the NIL, how much money is he going to get, to be on a roster in college, that kind of thing with various players. It's just on the landscape now. We can't escape it. We have to talk about it. That's where high school at the big time level is at, and obviously college, the roster turnover. But when you look at this guy, he's a good team player. You see there's brother in the highlights. He's blocking a shot. They've been together 4 years. They're obviously brothers, so that helps out. They won 3 state titles going into their senior year. Now, again, is he, LeBron James or Jabari Parker or, Alonzo Mourning, any of these great high school players. I think accolades-wise, he is, meaning how much things he's done at the high school level, he is. Again, we can talk about how good he could be in the NBA. That's for another segment, for another podcast. But the things he's accomplished as a high school player, he is at that level. So you got to give him credit. You want him on your team. If you're trying to win a high school game, I don't think very many people would pass him up right now. Again, he was a national player 2 years ago as a sophomore. That means he was over Cooper Flagg. He was over guys who are NBA rookies right now. Best player in the country, whether it's DJ Wagner, Isaiah Collier, guys who are trying to break into NBA rosters. He was better than them 2 years ago. Just as good as last year, I would think. Now, obviously, they beat Montverde beat them a few times, and Cooper had a great year. So I just think the panel did great by picking Cooper Flagg Player of the Year. But I mean, it's back. If he's the 2-time National Player of the Year, and this team finishes number 1, I mean, you got to look at him as one of the better high school players in recent memory.
I agree with that. Ani, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Cameron Boozer, about 6'9"-ish. I mean, he's a 4-man. He's very skilled. One underrated aspect of his game, in my opinion, is how well he just starts breaks. He just ignites breaks. Either that's grabbing a rebound and going, or that's grabbing a rebound and really just advancing it up and finding the open man. I think Cam, obviously, like what he is in the paint, he can finish through contact because he has really good size. He's a good quality spot-up three-point shooter that I think has upside of getting better, and we'll see that down the road. A good enough athlete where he finishes above the rim, but I like just the way he just he's not someone that's trying to show you, oh, y'all say I can't shoot it well enough, well, I'm going to shoot a lot of threes. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to be in the paint. I'm back to basket, face up, and attack and score, but I also can show that I can get my teammates involved, find cutters, ignite breaks, and then, if you do back off, when I do catch the ball from the three-point line, I'm going to knock it down. So I think he adds versatility. I think he's a very underrated passer. Obviously, we see 38 points, 16 rebound games, but we don't really see like the potential assists that he really, like if guys made their shots or layups or just the assists that he garners or the attention he garners just when the ball's in his hands. He requires two to three guys to really pay attention to him, and he finds the open man. I think his teams that he plays on are just so much better with him on the court, and he's such a plus, and that's what's made him, along with the accolades, but that's what makes Cameron Boozer obviously in the conversation as a top 1 or 2 player in the country.
I agree with that, Ani. And, to Ronnie's point, you left out that the Boozer brothers won 3 EYBL championships too on the circuit with Knight Riders. So they're just winners. I mean, winning pedigree. Cameron's a big time player. They're going to do well in college. I want to switch gears a little bit to a guard who I feel like had a big summer. I had the pleasure of watching Kyan Anthony on the EYBL circuit this summer, and I thought he made some big leaps. I think he's going to impress people this year in his senior season. I think he's still undecided college-wise, but give me your thoughts on him, Ronnie.
Yeah, Kyan's part of a great team, and like you said, he's going to have his chances. Lehigh, they finish in a 5th. Lehigh finished projected 4th in the league, so they qualified for Geico or Chipotle the past 2 years. So he's going to get his opportunity. I think he has a great face-up game. He's improving. He's got pieces around him. He doesn't have to dominate every night where some of the players in this range, their big guns have to really dominate each game. And he's not in that boat. They got Nigel James going to Marquette, a great point guard. Alir Malik, a big guy, Florida State. And 2 guys that I know Ani really likes, the Bingo brothers. So, Kyan doesn't have a lot of pressure on him to put up 25. He can just play his game, score. He's a big-time scorer, and he's a good team player. I think he gets a little knock for, liking to shoot it a lot. But when it comes down to it, if this team's going to win and Coach Buck does a great job, he's going to be in the flow of the offense. It ain't going to be what we see sometimes in the summer with him. You see him there, breaking down defenders. He's going to be a team player, a piece, and a player that's going to get his accolades as this team wins.
I can see that. What do you think, Ani?
Yeah, Kyan, I think he's made a step as just a scorer. Obviously, during the high school season last year, he was more of a spot-up guy for them, for that Long Island Lutheran team. And I think he's really shown the ability to create off the dribble and the score. Yeah, it's like Ronnie talked about. There are instances where we see him shoot like a real high volume of shots. But I think that's just part of the development process, right? Yeah. And I think he was in a place where he could do that. I think he's going to be more efficient this year. The Mingo brothers, I'm big on. Caden Mingo was actually really good at USA basketball. I think he talked about someone that's taken a step forward. I think he has. But Kyan can score it, good shooter, especially off the catch and on the move. I think his off the dribble scoring has improved tremendously. What I want to see this year is, can he do it more efficiently in the high school setting? And I think he will be. I think because, like Ronnie said, there's Nigel James, the Mingo brothers, Alir Malik. Like, you got other guys there, and I just think his offensive like role increases, but he doesn't have to shoot 20 times a game for them to win. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. So we didn't really go into a differentiator of what makes the top 15 teams the top 15 teams. Would you say it's a combination of star power? We've already broken down some players, combination of depth. And do you guys anticipate a lot of movement? I guess I know Ani spoke earlier about it going back and forth between Columbus and Link, but it seems like there's a lot of really talented players. And with a lot of these teams being in the same conference, I feel like there's bound to be some changes throughout the season. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to be some movement. I would say this top five is a little bit shakier than I've seen in the past, honestly. And I think I think from 3 to 5, we're going to see a lot of movement. Like we're going to see a new number 3, a new number 4, a new number 5. Like, I think from 3 all the way down, you're going to see a lot of movement there, to be honest with you. I think the top 2 is going to be the top 2. I think, Link may take a bad loss, or Columbus may take a bad loss, and they may drop down some. But, I mean, maybe. But I definitely think 3 down, I think you're going to see a lot of movement there.
Ronnie?
Well, yeah, to that point, like you said, teams in the conference. So if you're 4th or 5th place in that EYBL Scholastic, you're not necessarily going to stay there. They all play great schedules. Just picking some off. Let's say Utah Prep. They play 1, 2, 3. All Link, Montverde, Columbus.
Right.
So, it's going to solve itself. You got Perry. Perry plays Columbus on January 20th. That's number 11, Perry out of Arizona. They play Harvard Westlake right after the new year in Arizona. Roosevelt plays Brennan. I think Yanni's going to see that game on November 30th. So, again, if Brennan's on the hot seat there at number 30, dude, Roosevelt's got to win that game to beat 10. You know what I mean? In Texas. So you again, I'm just going by the teams and some of their schedules. It's the scheduling, Chelsea, that thing makes the big difference. And especially when you take on some of those games. Gonzaga, we know they have a great team. They're the number 1 team in the Catholic League in DC. They play Oak Ridge on December 6th, and they play Columbus on December 7th. So, dude, you line it up, you get it. Go get it. Like, Columbus is there for the taking. Columbus is on your radar. People know who they are. Go get it from them. Take it from them.
It's tough to have them on a back-to-back, though, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Like, schedule.
Beat that. Yeah. You're from DC and you got to go to Florida. You're on South Beach, or maybe some of your kids go out at late at night and want to try to see what's out there in Florida, and you got to get back up for that game. This is a national level schedule. So some of those teams like that, and then we don't really have to speak about the teams in the league because they're going to play each other in the league. But I was more speaking about the teams that are not in the league. They got big games. Link's got to play Utah Prep on November 26th. So to Ani's point, there's going to be movement, and the rankings are going to kind of solve themselves because of the results.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see that. So just speaking of number 1s, Columbus is locked in as number 1 this year. I want to touch on our all-time preseason number 1s. And let's kind of just give a little comparison about how you think this team fares. I know you said, Ani, that this top 5 is shaky. So I would imagine that this number 1 is not super solidified in your book either. But just speak about how you think they fare against some of the all-time preseason number 1s we have listed here.
They're okay. I mean, it's the all-time one. I think they're kind of probably like middle of the road, middle of the road, like bottom, like in the lower middle. of it all. Like when we talk about the Oak Hill teams, when you talk about like Montverde's, St. Patrick's, Finley Prep, like I don't know if how Columbus matches up with those. I think Columbus is actually really good, but I mean those are some really special teams. I think some of these teams that we see on here, they wouldn't lose. Then they're going to stay number one throughout the year. I do think Columbus and Link to me are the two best teams in the country this season, but I wouldn't call it like I don't think they're a special team. Like I don't think they're like and they're a special for this season. But when you talk all time, I don't think they're special.
Got it.
Fair, Ronnie.
Well, yeah, he's talking about, how they stack up, and he's right, because in that sense, this year, this 225 class has to prove themselves. I've heard a lot of EYBL Scholastic coaches tell me, we have a chance. There's no good big men. We have a chance in this conference. They're saying that. And it's like, ooh. And you have teams like Perry, Roosevelt, Columbus at the top, Gonzaga, they feel they have a chance. Even you go down to Sidwell, Brewster, and some of the teams in our second segment. Marshall's a really good team in Virginia. They have a chance. Whereas, like Ani's point, last year, not a lot of teams had a chance to beat Montverde, the 2014. That's the 9th time that Montverde start number one. So this is a whole new slate. It is special in the terms of they're one of those 12 programs that have started number one once. So our last team that's like this, like Columbus, that's playing for a state title, is Jabari Parker's junior year at Simeon. They started number one. They went 33-1. They only lost to Finley Prep at Hoop Hall. They were, people gave me crap. Oh, you started Jabari and them number one. They went 33-1. They were right there. They had the chance. They were down 6 entering the fourth quarter. They win that game. They finished number one. And Jabari's still a great player. And, shout out. And he played with 2 other NBA players. So it's not like that team didn't deserve it. Yeah. So in that regard, it's very special because, like to Ani's point, you don't see a team that's playing for a state title, especially in the Oak Hill Montverde dominate. Look at that. Oak Hill Montverde started 18 times at number one.
Yeah.
That's 18 of like 30 seasons. You know what I mean? So shout out to Coach Hurley and his program. They started number one twice. Kevin Boyles, obviously at Montverde, he started at Patrick School. They had Derek Character. He was supposed to be the biggest name since Ben Hur in 03. They had a great team. And then their 09 team had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Kyrie Irving, and Dexter Strickland. You're going to think you're going to win a lot of games with that team. They didn't finish number one, but that's a good team. They had a really great run at it. So those 12 teams that give a shout out. Obviously, we couldn't list them because of space constraints, but those 12 teams that have started number one once are special because they had that opportunity. And they have that opportunity. And back to Audie's point about the scheduling and the depth, Columbus is going to have its chance to stay there.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to the difficulty and how hard it is. Like 9 times, that's crazy for Montverde and Oak Hill. But just quickly, I know we got through all of our teams and you guys see the top 15. Before we continue just kind of breaking down those teams, I just want to remind everybody again that we have more detailed write-ups on ballislife.com. So please, 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 if you feel like your team was not talked about enough, if there are players that you are interested in learning more about and that you want to follow throughout the season, do not hesitate after this show to go to ballislife.com and check out the breakdowns and the write-ups. It'll be something useful for you throughout the season. And obviously, if you want a more in-depth look at a team that you're interested in, we have that there for you as well. So I encourage everyone to do that. But continuing with the top 15, Ronnie and Ani, talk to me about a team on the rise.
Yeah, I'll start. I like to go with number 9, La Lumiere, in terms of a team on the rise. Because I think we talked about the turnover. We talked about the roster turnover, especially for these big conferences. And for me, they have 3 veterans, and I think that will make a big difference. In a year where that, like we said, that doesn't seem to be a super team. Maybe Link or Columbus turns into that. The Lakers have a real chance to finish in 2nd place, 3rd place, maybe even win the league championship. That would be a big feather in the cap for Coach Pat Holmes. They have a chance. And I'm big on players who've been in that league now for 2 years. I think that makes a big difference because it doesn't happen often. And those close losses last year may turn into wins. And we're talking about, Chuck Love, who's going to Chicago, Darius Adams, great player going to UConn, Melvin Bell, underrated kid going to San Jose State, and their big gun, who's a top 10 player going to Notre Dame, Jalen Harrelson. Harrelson, Adams, and Love were in the lineup last year, and I just think taking some of those lumps against Cooper Flag and those guys are going to pay off this year.
Okay, I can see that. What about you, Ani? Who's your team on the rise?
I think Grayson out of Georgia, obviously adding Caleb Holt, 226 guard, who he steadily keeps improving. We're talking about someone that's like a top 5 level player in the country. I think adding him with Amir Taylor, with Jacob Wilkins, you got a big guard that can play make. I think really provides rim pressure and becoming a better shooter. I think just with that core 3, with the other pieces that they have, I think they have a chance to get into the top 10 and make a push into the top 5. I think they have depth. They can switch and guard. They got good size. And I think just the addition of Caleb Holt, a top 3 to 5 player in the country, it's always going to put you in with the opportunity to really make a rise, even though you're at 12. And it's hard when you're asking for a rise because like 15-1, like it's not like a huge rise. I mean, you're still in that tier, the highest tier that we talk about. But I do think Grayson has a chance to sneak into the top 10, potentially in the top 5.
Okay, interesting. So on the flip side, give me your teams that may be on the hot seat in the top 15. I'll start with you, Ronnie.
Yeah, I'll go to number 13, St. John Bosco. Now, again, that's tough because they got great players, Brandon McCoy. Again, if Caleb Holt's right there, we got, Tyrone Stokes, who we talked about, and his buddy Brandon McCoy. And you see Brandon McCoy in these highlights, and he's a lot bigger and stronger than those highlights now.
Yes.
He is a hell of a talent, and they got to get it done. So, Coach Dunn does a great job, but they want to get back to that Southern Section title game after missing out last year and falling to D1. They weren't in the Open. They have the most talent in the Trinity League, and they are solid favorites. But, Mater Day's tough in that league. Jay Sarah is really talented on paper. And Bosco's traveling in a national schedule, as we see there with Brandon McCoy having one great player. And they have, Alzie Harrington going to Harvard, who's a great pickup for them. They got the horses, but they have to do it locally first. And since they're playing the national schedule, they got to potentially face number Roosevelt, who's above them in the Damien final, which would be the 30th in Southern California. They got to win that. So then they got to come back and beat Paul the 6th on the 18th. And that's on Saturday in Springfield, Mass. They got to travel home Sunday, and they play Jay Sarah on MLK Monday. So, they have to do it. We know they have the talent. We talk about those players. Christian Collins is a great addition to the team. Some people think he's the fastest rising player in the country. He's part of that 226 class. But he's been a backup at the high school level, meaning in the scholastic setting. He ain't done it yet. And this team has the ability to do it. But for now, they start off number 2 in California behind Roosevelt. They definitely have a chance to be number 1. It'll play out. But they have to do it. So I just think for their talent level and for what they showed at the Border League, people are going to be expecting them to win. So now that puts a little pressure on them.
What's up with this NBA scheduling? I mean, some of these games feel like trap games because I got to fly here, and then I got to play the number 1 team in the country. I think it's tricky. Some of these teams might just take a loss due to schedule. I mean, it seems that way based off of what you guys are saying. But anyway, Ani, what about you? Give me your team that's on the hot seat.
Yeah, definitely Utah Prep. I mean, we kind of talked some about their schedule. They got a loaded schedule. My whole thing is AJ, as good of a basketball player he is, he has to be so good every night for them to have a chance to beat these level of teams. And I just think that's a little unrealistic to ask for. I think that's it's not fair. It's not fair to ask. Obviously, he's terrific talent. We've seen him. He's getting dunks. He can score the basketball in away arrays. He can play make. He's a really good pull-up shooter. He has big positional size, so when he rises up, it doesn't really matter how high you jump. He's just going to jump higher and finish. He has really good hang time on his layups. I mean, there's so many things about AJ that makes him special. But I do think that's why we have him at 14, but that's also why I have him in the hot seat, because I think he has to be special damn near every game for them to win all their ranked games, right? Not like, they're going to have some games that they can win by 60 in their sleep, but when they have to play the really high level games, he has to be so special. And I think the teams above them, I don't think that's the case for their top guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that they have to drop 30 in order for them to win. Like, Cam Boozer doesn't have to be that way in order for Columbus to win a high level game. But I think AJ has to be that. And I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, AJ's a hell of a player, great talent, but I think that's just hard to tell him to maintain that for 30 plus games and then say, okay, at the end of it, y'all still a top 15 team in the country.
No, for sure. I can see that. It seems like you said, the expectations, I guess, Ani, might be a little bit just unrealistic for him to have to do that every single night. But also, he's the number one kid in the country. So I feel like, that's where the pressure comes in for, him to do those kind of things.
Yeah, but like, what number one player in the country? Like, that's hard regardless. Like, that's hard to ask someone to do. Could he do it? Yes. I ain't saying he's incapable. I'm just saying, like, that's hard as shit. Like, we ain't asking Cooper Flag to do that last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this, though. Would you prefer, Ronnie, a player of AJ's caliber to go to a stacked team like Mount Verde and run the table? Or would you prefer to see him do something like this? Maybe go to a lesser program with less star power around him and have him have to get to it every single night?
Yeah, I'll just answer your question. I'd rather have the latter. I'd like to see him do it because that gives them an opportunity. This is a program that's rebranded itself. Let's be honest. They're only at that spot because of him. They're only at that spot because they beat Columbus in a fall league game that everybody saw on TV by a point, because Columbus forgot about the shot clock or whatever they did there in that last second. So if they lose that game by 20, they lost already to them in the fall before. They're in the 30s maybe. And we're talking about him in a wholly different light. But like Ani says, that puts them in the spotlight. They're going to be on national TV a few times. They play the top 3 teams. They play Link on November 26th. So we're, basically a month away from seeing what Ani is saying. Can they do it? They do have some other pieces, JJ Mandaquit. Yeah. And they have, some good talent, and it's just new for them. They're not used to this. So, they have a young head coach. They got some new pieces. So they're going to have to show it. And I think with that in mind, I would rather see him rise to the occasion than to be in a situation where like Chris Sinak is with Link, where he can go, 14-8 and Link will win because of their talent, or like last year what we saw with Derek Queen and or Cooper. They played great defense and they played great team ball, but sometimes that happens. And he's not the first great high school player that had to do that. Maybe up to this spotlight, but that I like it in the way they are. Let them prove it. 14 is plenty high for them. Plenty good. I think it's perfect. I think it's okay. It's they could have been a few spots lower. I don't think nobody would have called it a crime. They could have been a few spots higher. Obviously, they weren't going to be 5 or 6, but you can't put them at 47 if they just beat Columbus 2 weeks ago. So
right. I agree with Ronnie. I prefer the latter. To me, I don't care if they even drop. Like, he's still gonna be the most fun player to watch in the country. Like, it doesn't matter. But I just don't think they'll be able to keep that spot. But I love the fact that this is the position he's in. Like, he makes it like must-see TV.
Yeah, and they are part of they have to play, Prolific Prep, who's above them. Let's give them a little kudos because they won that grind session last year. There's another team in that grind session in our list, Dream City, who was the runner-up. Dream City's a good team with a lot of good players. They play Prolific, obviously. They play Utah Prep, and they're going to play number 34, Winston-Salem Christian. They're all in the same conference, so again, maybe those Games are not as publicized as some of the others that we're going to see, but they got some games they got to play. And so you asked Chelsea about what the difference was maybe from now to then, many years ago is, and I think Kevin Boyle mentioned it. I was talking to him in the preseason a little bit. Is now you got Link and Columbus, even in Montverde. Those guys have 15 to 18 games that are really tough. I think the number one team 20 years ago had 5 games that were really tough. They were going to roll through the other ones. They maybe played in a big tournament or had one big game. It's not like that. It's like we said earlier in our special episode, it's a national game. Chelsea, you mentioned it. Travel's going to be a factor in some of these games, and wear and tear. Just whether getting big. And back to Jabari Parker. He had an injury going into his senior year, which is a year after they were preseason number 1, and they didn't live up to the expectations that next year, even though they had a good team, because it was a lot of pressure. They played the Twins, who went to Kentucky right away on a TV game, and they didn't look too hot. And Simeon didn't play as good. They lost 6 games. So pressure's tough. We can't knock that. Some guys are built for it. Not everybody in this top 50 is built for it.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely going to be interesting. So we have the list. We have our teams. We have Columbus solidified as the preseason number 1. So real quick, I want to ask both of you guys, will Columbus be number 1 at the end of the season? Will they be a final number 1? Whoever wants to go first.
Ooh, that's a hell of a question. I'll say yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I'll say
okay.
yes.
How many losses or no losses? Are they going undefeated like Montverde?
No.
We need to know. Okay, they're not going undefeated, but they're going to still climb their way back to number 1 if they take
two losses, maybe 3. Maybe 3.
Wow.
Ronnie?
Okay, so as I have preseason number 1, I think they're going to be number 1. That's sometimes you look at a team like, wow, that team's going to rise. And I want to give Link a mention, even though Link has a new coach. 2 years ago, with their coach who moved on to college, they finished number 1. So that didn't matter. I don't think with Link that they moved on and had a transition, and our Coach Armstrong moved to college, that didn't have too much of a bearing. It's more they don't have Cameron Boozer. You know what I mean? He's
right.
on Columbus. So to shout out to their coaching staff, they've done a great job in recent years.
Shout out to Chad Myers.
Yeah, exactly. You give them some credit. So they, I think, will be number 1, but they may have a loss or 2. But I just wanted to rattle this down to your point, Chelsea. Prolific Prep, November 14th, number 8. Wheeler, November 30th in Atlanta. Host Gonzaga on December 7th, number 7.
Yeah.
Montverde on the 24th of January. Link on the January 31st. City of Palms, December 18th to 23rd. It's like you play Great Crossing, right? Malachi Moreno's a good player down at City of Palms. That would be a great first round game. Now Columbus might win. Again, I'm not knocking number 35 Great Crossing at all. But Columbus wins that game. Then you got Grayson, who's on his team. Is like Grayson could do some shit. They're in the quarterfinals. Like it ain't gonna be easy for Columbus. That's just what the games we talked about, right? So that's in one tournament. Then they're gonna have to face IMG or Lalamere in the semis, and that's a lot. Like you said, Chelsea, that's again they have Jackson Richardson. Now they got Caleb Gaskins, and they got his brother. We haven't even talked about that much. Who's a really good high school player. So they have the schedule. I just think they're going to drop a game. But if I didn't think they'd finish number 1, I wouldn't put them number 1. So.
Okay, I like that. All right, I'm gonna hold you guys to your picks. We'll be back on other episodes to follow up and see how you guys do. So we have our top 50 teams, but I want to show love to some teams that were on the bubble. We know how difficult it is to basically do rankings and put teams where we think that they go and kind of predict how their season's going to be. But there's always teams that make it tough, and I think, Ronnie, when you're doing that bottom half, especially, you always are kind of going back and forth with a couple of teams that you feel like could have definitely been in the field. So both of you guys, starting with Ronnie, talk to me about what you're seeing in the bubble teams and maybe give me a team that you thought could have been in, but just was on the outside.
Okay. We're looking at Sunny Slope. We talked about them. There's 2 teams from Arizona, Perry and we talked about the team on our hot seat a little bit, Millennium. Well, Sunny Slope is right there. They're going to play Roosevelt on middle November, I think November 23rd in California. So they'll get their chance. They have a great young group led by the center, Darius Wabbington. Just a good team. Coach Portala was our national coach of the year 3 years ago. They have a chance. I also like Calvary Christian. That sticks out to me. The teams in Florida are very good. We've talked about that. Obviously, I'm not even talking about the Montverts and IMGs of the world. I'm just talking about their regular high school teams that are playing for state titles. Sean Abib, lefty, awesome player. Caden Daughtry, great young player, 227. Calvary Christian's good. Sage Mon is good, who's not even lifted there. So I wanted to give a shout out to those Florida teams because they've really upped their national profile in the last 5 to 7 years, just as Ani would say the Texas teams have in the last 10 years. So those are two teams that stand out to me.
Ani, what about you?
For me, I think Combine Academy just each year, they're always like very competitive, very good. I'm excited to kind of see what they have going on this year. I actually will be at the John Wall Classic this year. I think they'll be playing in that. So I'll be able to get a really good look at them. The Colony, obviously, they made in Dallas, they made a regional finals run where they lost at the end. But they're a team. They returned their core guys. We always talk about at these levels, these schools return their core guys, and they have Dakari Spears, the top 35 level player in the country in 226, and the other guys have gotten better. So I think the Combine Academy, I always just Combine every year. I just see them. They're just really, really good. They're efficient. They just playing the right way, and they're really competing against the high level team. So those two schools really stand out to me.
Yeah, every year we have some bubble teams that kind of creep in. So good luck to these teams. I'm sure they're going to have their opportunities and their chances. I guess I want to close with just some games to watch. Obviously, we kind of gave a rundown of some of these tough schedules and how difficult, the stretch will be for a lot of these teams at the top. What stands out to you guys here? Or games that you're looking forward to most? Ani, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I definitely think this Columbus versus Perry one is very interesting. Just seeing where each team is at by January, right? Yeah. And then Perry again, like I think that Cole Pete, Cameron Boozer just matchup. That's just always that intrigues me. I think Perry can match up well against Columbus. And then for me, obviously, like you got Columbus and Link. That's obvious, but I like this Prolific versus Wheeler matchup. Again, like November 27, both teams have been playing some games. Let's see how good Prolific is. We have them, at 8? And seeing like, okay, with Darren Peterson and just Nicholas Bundalo, and I know they added 7 Spurlock, just where they're at and where Wheeler's at. I think that's like a good, like early good test. Like, is Prolific a top 5 team in the country, or they're outside the top 10? And where is Wheeler at? Does Wheeler kind of make that jump as well? I think that's a game of where are these teams at that current state going into December. So to me, those two games just stand out because I think Perry can match well against Columbus, and I want to see where Prolific and Wheeler's at, at that time going into December.
What about you, Ronnie?
Well, I'm looking at what Ani said to piggyback on him, Gonzaga and Roosevelt. So I'm looking at what's before. Let's say Gonzaga plays Columbus within 4 points or so on the road. And then Perry is going to match up with in Arizona. They got a matchup right away on the 2nd with a really good team. That would be Harvard Westlake, who we have at 19. So if they win that game, they got to beat Gonzaga in the semifinals on January 3rd. So that would put them at a higher tier. And then they would probably win that final in Arizona. So let's say Perry is undefeated. Let's say Perry knocks out Gonzaga, knocks out Harvard Westlake. And now we're looking at maybe the biggest regular season game in Arizona history at Hoop Hall. Let's say Columbus is 1 or 2, How about if Koa Pete's playing great and like now you got that matchup that Ani wants to see and like he does really well. It's kind of like what sets these games up. You know what I mean? And then when you look at Gonzaga, how about if Gonzaga beats Columbus and is doing good? And now Roosevelt has their chance. Roosevelt beats, St. John Bosco in that Damien final, and then 20 days later, they have that big game. So that will be a big game, that MLK Monday, as it usually is. So I look at those two games. Obviously, the early games are important. Link has to get off to a right start, like I said, like Ani said, and you said, Chelsea. If AJ goes nuts and drops 40,
Yeah,
and that close, now Link's on the hot. Now we have a game early. So there's some good early games. Some of that are not even mentioned here, but I like those two games that I mentioned on MLK Monday because of what could set them up prior. You got to win a couple of tournaments, and that hopefully I'm going to see Ani hopefully right after New Year's in Arizona, and that we watch those games in that 3-day slate because they could be really big.
Yeah, for sure. I could see that. And I'm excited for this season because it's just more open. Like, I think there could be a lot more upsets. I think some of your guys' predictions could be way off. In the past, it's been a little bit predictable. But I definitely look forward, to season 7 of In the Paint Show. And when we break down, we'll talk about a lot of these key performances and some of these games throughout the season as we look, as we go through the schedule, I guess. So, Nani, we have the rankings, everything's set. Kind of tell our viewers just what's next. What goes on from here after? When's the next updated poll?
Yeah, what's great about the poll is that it'll be good for a couple weeks. Like you can come back to it. Oh yeah, this kid's there. Hopefully we don't have any more October surprises. We had one with Caleb Gaskins, but that didn't change much. And Monverde's going to have to show that they can really get after it and coach these guys up. I think to your point, Chelsea, I think they might even be looking forward to it a little bit in a low key kind of way. Like, hey, people thought we get great players, we get Cade Cunningham, we get these guys. They're going to have to coach and win these games. So that's going to be something to look forward to. And the rankings will be good, and we'll come back after Ani's all his Thanksgiving, hoop fest and the holiday hoopsgiving. Ani might be at both. He might jump from Atlanta to Duncanville and watch, as much as he can. So we'll come back after that Thanksgiving big weekend, and we'll put the rankings out on December 2nd. And leading up to that, we'll have the regional rankings where some of those bubble teams will get their shine on November 11th. And then what you like, Chelsea, what Ani likes, the big players, the Mr. Basketball USA preseason tracker will be November 19th. So again, 11th regionals, 19th, and then come back when the season's already going on the 2nd. Then we'll try to do it every week from there on out. But so that's the big thing. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about other top players besides Boozer, but it's not a guarantee that he's gonna just be the national player of the year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a guarantee. I do think it's kind of open. Again, to just determine how Columbus does throughout the year. Obviously, how AJ plays, who is the number one player in that class, and then guys like Darren Peterson. Let's not sleep on guys like him that could have a really big year. He's going to lead that prolific prep squad. And Chris Sinak, who was fantastic at USA Basketball. I mean, he's someone that, he looks like a future lottery pick. So, Boozer's going to have some competition for that. So I don't think it's open, but I do think, he would definitely be in the lead of that if I were to. He's my projected winner of it, but I don't think it's a guarantee for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, Koa P, don't forget about him if they have a great season, and they haven't lost a playoff game since he's been in the lineup. It's kind of like a Stanley Johnson thing. He's just a great player. Give him credit. He may if they win again, he's probably going to surpass Mike Bibby as the greatest Arizona high school player ever, and that's give him some credit. So we'll see where he goes to college, and I think that's what people are holding their breath for in the state of Arizona.
I heard he's staying down south. He's going to be coming down south. I heard he's coming down south.
Ani has the intel already, Chelsea. I know.
I heard he's coming down south.
We'll see. We'll see what happens, Ani. We will see. But I just wanted to thank you guys so much for tuning into this special edition of the In the Paint Show. Here's a recap of all 50 teams as we broke them down by segment from top to bottom. We didn't get to talk about every single team, but as I said before, you can find detailed write-ups of your favorite players and your favorite teams on ballislife.com. Good luck to all the teams that we mentioned today, especially those that are going to creep in from the bubble, because it happens every single year. Ronnie and Ani get some teams wrong every single year. So it's going to be exciting to just kind of follow up with the movement of each week all the way until Chipotle Nationals in April. So thanks for tuning in, guys.
Take care, guys.